Hello, welcome to The Future Is A Mixtape. I'm Jesse.
This is Matt.
We go fast-paced in this one.
Get angry. We start debating.
Oh, yeah.
It's almost like the old days when we used to debate about things. Like, I guess we celebrated our debates about celebrity and religion was one of the more cantankerous moments. But we're going to get kind of cantankerous with each other because we're talking about what must be done.
What the fuck is the next step?
What must be done?
Yeah, come on. What's next?
It's not going to be just falafel and popsicles. We've got to think this through. You don't mix falafel and popsicles together.
Oh, shit.
And this is what the left's doing. They're trying to say it's all okay, have that punched popsicle stabbed into the heart of the falafel. Work on your shit. Falafels for lunch, popsicles for night. So work it out.
Yeah,
Help us work it out, lefties.
Let's create a real plan.
Yes.
Enjoy.
All right, so we talked about the golden square.
Religion, capitalism, celebrity. No need for it. Let's get rid of that shit. Somehow.
Poison pyramid.
Some way.
Gone.
Poison pyramid.
We don't need you.
Toxic triangle, whatever you want to call it.
Gone.
Need to get rid of that stuff. They're playing like they're here to stay, but we gotta come over the way to get them out the arena. There they go.
Gone.
There they go.
Gnats in the wood.
Setting up a better world. Food, shelter, healthcare, education for everybody. Free.
Golden
Basic.
square. Cornerstones down.
Now we start to talk about living. Okay. How the fuck are we going to get there? What do we do? Because right now we're the furthest thing from that shit.
If we look at the documentary by Michael Moore, Where to Invade Next, he gives a kind of a modus operandi to liberals on how to effectively persuade people about policy. It doesn't talk about labels, doesn't talk about politics, doesn't talk about political parties. He just says
looks at examples of
things that work.
Oh, that's cool. That works.
It's the rhetoric of effectiveness. What is the rhetoric and ideology of effectiveness? And so knowing what we want to get rid of, the poison pyramid, knowing what we want to institute on these essential tracks to the future mixtape, which you already mentioned, and then coming up with the aims of persuasion, right? Looking for the way that we frame things that aren't tribal.
Right.
But what do we do now?
Right.
Because we're in a shit box.
Right.
We're in a shit box within a shit box.
Tribalism, like, here's my issue, is like the single issue arguments, right?
Yes. Among the left or the right?
Yeah. Either side. Abortion, gun rights, blah, blah, blah.
It's built around the mythology that if I work on this one issue, all these other issues will magically connect to it, and that this issue will solve all those other issues.
But is there a magic issue? Is it you? Some people seem to be arguing now. We'll talk more about this. But basic income, is this a magic bullet?
It's a basic solution, but it's not organized around a basic problem, which is number one. How do you institute a fundamental solution that would be massively transformational? I mean, the basic income is a 21st century dream, but it was written about as early as by Thomas Paine. So there's been writing by John Locke, Thomas Paine about basic income. So there's not a new idea. No,
it's an old idea. It's an old idea.
Even Milton Friedman experimented with some of these as thoughts with negative interest rates. So, it's not exactly a new concept, but the idea that it could actually happen is radical.
Right.
But the problem is, if we look at the way in which that idea is blocked, as well as many other ideas are blocked.
Right, exactly.
It becomes down to money and politics.
Yeah, okay, that's an idea there.
Well, let me just touch on this.
Money and politics.
If from activists and from activism, and this is something I felt and saw with Occupy Riverside in 2011, is that each and every issue that came up, whether it was military-industrial complex, foreclosure crisis, anything, it was
always about money.
It was always about who owned the political process,
right?
Who was able to narrow the range of discussion that was possible, as well as actually write legislation. And again, we can see actual lobbyists write legislation or actually develop it through an organization like ALEC, where again and again,
that's the Koch brothers.
Well, and remember the clip that we played back on Shelter, where Michael Shannon's talking about that America is the history of the winners.
Yep.
It's not a history of the losers.
America was built for the winners.
Yes, exactly. The winners are there. Their winners win. Mm-hmm. It's not built for. It has no intention to ever recognize the losers, and the losers are the voters who lose out each time when they vote for a politician, then betrays them because the class interests are divided between money and voters.
me, you. Let's play the Beck song, Loser, to this. This is our anthem here.
Let's play right now. Let's play right now. Yeah, you're a loser,
musical
baby.
interlude. Every other 99% losers.
And the thing to remember about this, of course, is that people tend to individualize the problems with healthcare, with education, with traffic or crime or pollution. We tend to individualize it as these individual actors. And so if we talk about systemic problems like institutional racism or institutional sexism, we can talk about the institutional privilege of money class. The money class system really rewards those with the most money. I guess the best analogy I give to the role of money in politics is if you're in an apartment complex and everybody's in their own apartment, at their balcony, some people are at swimming pools, people are talking to each other in their house, in their apartment, at the swimming pool, and some dick comes in with a giant fucking boombox and has it up all the way, which blocks out the ability of speech acts for people at the chlorine-infested swimming pool.
Yeah.
The woman that's doing laundry on her line, she has to take off the phone because she can't talk to her aunt.
Yep.
The girl that's trying to do some
Drowns
dry
out.
humping and can't communicate that I don't want to go to third base yet. And this
Douchebag drowns it out. Yeah.
And that's essentially what the lobbyist and moneyed class does to the democratic process of
Drowns
the apartment
out
complex.
every other voice.
Every other voice is blocked out. And so again and again, people don't see anything materially improve in their lives because those winners have to win.
So what about money in politics? Because it's a problem, but what do we do? What's next? What do we do?
Well, it's incredibly unsexy because, number one, it's hard to get
what's
angry.
unsexy?
Try to organize against any kind of bureaucracy. Okay. It's really hard. People just don't get angry at a bureaucracy. If I give you a stack of papers and say, let's burn this shit up, it's not as exciting as punching someone in the face. And because it's an institutional, bureaucratic problem, it's hard to emotionally inspire people to create a massive nationwide movement to get, let's say, a 28th Amendment for public financing. Because we know now, I mean, obviously, if you do your basic research, the greater Scandinavia region or the Nordic countries, they all have significant barriers for private profit and private wealth to impede on the political process. So like Norway is the happiest place on earth, according to the most recent happiness study for 2017. 74% of the money in the political structure for elections is public financing.
Yep.
And the other 26% is from political party membership dues. And so essentially the horrors of our society is really about a bureaucratic system.
So you've been working for 5 years outside of your teaching gig with this group called 28ers that you helped start up. That's
came out of Occupy Riverside, actually.
Yeah, inspired by the Occupy movement and the pushes to create awareness for and advocate for a 28th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution that would eliminate money that would be for public financing of all elections, right?
So all money that is used for elections would be publicly financed. So we have our website, www.28ers.org, which you can check out, that actually has our amendment that we wrote and drafted. And the thing that this was supposed to be, at least in my heart of hearts, was a nationwide movement organized around a 20th Amendment. And it came out of Occupy Riverside because what I saw at Occupy was incredibly exciting and inspiring. It changed my life. There's no doubt about it. The fact that I'm still doing activism and I haven't walked away from it tells you how important Occupy was in my heart and in my spirit.
And that was your first real deep dive into activism?
No. Actually, the anti-war movement with the Iraq War was 2003. And then I drifted. I casually followed Obama's election. I donated money once to his campaign. and thought, him being African American would be radical enough to, exactly. Yeah. But, looking back on it, he'd received more money from Wall Street than any other candidate in 2008.
Yep.
And Max Baucus, who was on the Senate committee for Montana as a senator from Montana, he received more money from the healthcare industry than anyone else. And so these kind of Democrats were already pretty much tied by money in politics. And I saw that money in politics was the issue, but I didn't understand it was the issue until actually getting involved with activists and seeing how money in politics kept preventing basic solutions from being implemented on every issue. Immigration,
right?
Foreclosure, student loans,
everything.
Banks.
The whole public realm of everything. Yes. Yeah. So is it accurate to say your conviction is that this is the thing to do?
Yes.
This is the key to unlock the door, to get us towards...
This is the logical thing. This is the rational thing. So, for instance, it's like what Lawrence Lessig, the internet rights, who's helped create Creative Commons and also is a Harvard constitutional law scholar, has done a lot of work on public financing and a 28th Amendment as an idea, or just campaign reform. He said in a very famous TED Talk that your thing that you care about, whether it's healthcare or immigration or whatever individual biographical private wound, is essentially a fetish doll that doesn't do anything until you fundamentally reshape the incentivization device in politics, which is money in politics. And that you can't solve your individual issue, number one, because your activist culture around that issue is too small.
Right.
And there are many people on other issues that are working on other issues that want to be ahead of you.
Would you say that this, in your argument, would be that this is a lever, like not an in and of itself, right?
No, this is a process for radical transformation.
This is a way to open up for possibilities.
Yeah, I mean,
do the next necessary
absolutely.
thing,
So for me, I ironically want to reform the government so I can ultimately get rid of it.
Right.
And that's as an anarchist, I have an inside-outside strategy.
So you think this is the next step, is a 28th Amendment?
Yeah.
So how does that happen, though?
So the process would be, for instance, there's two different forms that this can take.
How isn't this a chicken and egg thing? Like, how can that happen while there's money in politics?
Exactly. Well, it's once again, we can see the power of movements build over time, and they're getting bigger and bigger. So if you think about the level of participation with Bernie Sanders' movement, which I was involved with,
and then
was much bigger and more diverse than Occupy ever was.
Mm-hmm.
And Occupy did have an effect in terms of creating a labeling for the 99% and also encouraging and creating some hardcore lifetime activists.
But that was then. That was 2011.
Exactly. But Bernie was a whole year.
Yeah.
I mean, we never had that.
But Bernie didn't have the 28th Amendment money out of politics as part of his platform.
Actually, if you look at his campaign, it basically mirrors what you'd want from public financing, which means that the money, because it was a wide dispersal of people were giving him money, it was on average, as he always jokingly or seriously said, it was $27. And so he was getting this consistent, even-handed flow of money from across the country of very different ideologies, which basically made him like a public financed.
Okay. But how does that connect to how we would even pursue getting a 28th Amendment passed?
When Occupy Riverside happened, when it fell apart due to the de-encampment, and that was completely organized by the governor, by Obama, by many of the other political officials to just de-encamp, break up encampments, cite health concerns, purposely put homeless people that were mentally ill in these matrices so that it created ill will and made middle-class people disappear. It purposely broke up those things that had police officers acting as crazy people and breaking up the stack. When we broke apart, what was left from Occupy Riverside was a group of friends that were really committed to social change and were saying, well, what's next? Because shit's fucked up and bullshit. That was the phrase from Occupy. And that was the phrase from Occupy. Shit's fucked up and bullshit.
Was it?
Yes, it was the actual phrase in 2011.
Shit's
fucked up and bullshit.
Well, it still
is.
That's like a
you're smiling at
that's
it.
an evergreen kind of phrase.
Exactly. You're smiling of how relevant that is. And I've had
well before then.
And some of my Occupy friends that I still keep in touch with. They'll occasionally post that.
Hey, maybe we'd be more successful if we changed the name of the podcast to "Shit's Fucked Up and Bullshit."
Oh, I didn't think about it.
Maybe that's the title for this episode.
Oh my God! But how do you fit that on some of those internet pages?
And Apple, we had an episode called Starfuckers, and Apple automatically puts little stars.
Well, I mean, the thing is, we did a power analysis after the ashes of Occupy, and we realized, and a great friend and comrade, Elizabeth Ayala, who's done a lot of great social justice work in the empire, she did a power analysis essentially on how city politics work in Riverside area. And what was astonishing to see through her PowerPoint that she was kind of playing around with was that again and again what we'd see is that the person with the most money would have the most say in what happened in the city politics. So let's, for instance, tow truck companies. Many of them put their money on one political candidate. And if that candidate wins, they get what's essentially a no-bid contract for the city.
Yep.
And they can set the price. And that was a epiphany to me because that was profound, changed me too, because what Elizabeth had essentially done is taken the highest ecology of the warp drive of our society and the lowest and combined them, because the no-bid contract that was happening at that low level was the Bush campaign with Iraq War. Halliburton, KBR, they got no-bid contract. We're told that the winner wins if the best bets are put in, the best estimates, and that you compete for pricing on doing things. But it was a no-bid contract.
Yeah.
And that was the same system as KBR and Halliburton would fund these political candidates, and they got no-bid contracts.
So here's my thing. We've talked about this a lot, right? Years we've talked about this. And we have a bit of a struggle, even the two of us that see so eye to eye on so many of these things, right?
Yeah, what must be done?
On strategy steps. What must be done next?
What must be done?
And your argument is that, all right, the wedge to put into the system is a 28th Amendment. I'm not sure. How the fuck is that going to happen?
Okay,
though?
I haven't talked about the process. I'll talk about the process.
So just to give a little context, the process. So I think in the same way, those arguing for and advocating for a basic income, think of it exactly the same way. A wedge, some of them at least, some may think of it as an end in and of itself, but it should, for those that are more
strategic and
long-term thinking.
It's a piece in the puzzle.
It's just a wedge in the capitalist system to open up the doorway.
And what Peter Frey says, basic income essentially decommodifies labor.
Right. So there's all kinds of reasons and stuff. But strategically speaking, it's that, this is maybe something that we could get that would then lead to
all these other things.
Yeah.
But this is the thing is, it's not a chicken and egg thing. Universal basic income will be much harder to do than public financing.
But will it?
Yeah, I think so.
Are you sure?
Absolutely.
Why?
Because we'll need much higher rates of unemployment to do that under the current political structure. Absolutely. Really? We can't even get universal fucking health care, Jesse. You want to give out free money to losers and lazy people?
I don't.
This is the Republican Party. It's like losers and lazy people.
I don't think any of
the American work ethic. I mean, my God, shit.
Shit.
I think public financing is going to be easier and more important to do, because let me tell you why. Universal basic income is not going to allow the massive levels of research and development we will need to deal with climate change. That's not going to happen under the current system. No. Now, because the petroleum and coal burning industries and the death dealers of Exxon and others are preventing for 30 years R&D in solar power, R&D in wind and water technologies and wave technologies. So the thing is that we can accelerate all social justice issues almost equally, in an almost anarchist way through money in politics. So when you get public financing, what happens is every issue has a voice finally. The boombox has been destroyed. It's been dumped into the swimming pool. Remember that apartment complex metaphor? No,
you're jumping steps. Why
is this the
process? Process. Like, why is this the easier thing, and how?
Because number one, we can see that people can make movements based on ideas. minimum wage was an idea movement. It wasn't just a candidate that decided that we're going to create minimum wage.
Yeah, but there's much more of a movement for basic income than for public financing.
No, there's not. There's conversations on it, but it hasn't taken any political form. There's no political form. There's an organization called Wolfpack, which I recommend. Yeah. I'll give the link to. A Wolfpack is started up by Cenk Uygur and from the Young Turks, as well as Dylan Ratigan and a couple of other people, progressives. And the idea behind that is that we need to have a constitutional convention to get money out of politics. And there's two ways you can do that. You can have 2/3 of the House and the Senate from the federal government pass a constitutional law that then has to be ratified by the states, 37 states. And the other process is you can call for a constitutional convention with 34 states, right? Mm-hmm. Through the state houses, right? And then have a constitutional convention where the people draft.
If 34 states
say yes.
Okay. They can
then
call
we
for
can do that. And then 37 have to ratify it. Now, you think that's bonkers and shit. But we've had a constitutional bill.
I just want to have I want to like.
Okay, so let me educate you. Have you heard of the ERA movement? Do you know what ERA is? The Equal Rights Amendment Act. Mm-hmm. So this will drive people's bonkers, but actually they can't believe this was true at the time. But Betty Ford and other folks were very much in support of a Equal Rights Amendment Act for women to create equal pay and equal rights to women. And it was called the ERA, and it came from the beginnings of the women's suffrage movement, and it took off in the 1960s and 70s to an actual constitutional amendment to create equal rights for women in all kinds of ways. And it got very close. Now, interestingly enough, it started from Congress, the House, and the Senate by Republicans. Republicans used to have a strong feminist core in some of it. There wasn't the big kind of differences there are now between Republicans and Democrats.
They've totally been transformed.
Totally transformed. Yeah. And so they essentially were able to get it passed in, I think it was around 36 or 35 states. And then there was a time component put into the bill that said it had to be passed within a certain time frame. Mm-hmm. And Patty Schlafly, this anti-feminist, sexist woman, super Christian Nazi, worked against the bill, saying that if we have Equal Rights Amendment Act, this is going to allow gay people to marry and hermaphrodites to start hugging trees and shit. Yeah. So she started using the specter of queer phobia as part of the appeal to go against that. And she made lots of claims about the essential role of mothers and that mothers and men are not the same. And that kind of ended up being encapsulated within that evangelical movement in the 1980s or late 70s. And so she was able to kind of block and impede that process. But they were very, very close. Mm-hmm. And they had 35, 36 states before they were able to hit 37 for full ratification. So it had gotten very close. And a good friend of mine, Candy Doss, she worked actively in her home state. She's from the South. And, had her baby on her hip and was getting signatures and trying to get things ratified. And it got very close and it didn't make it. And it's a remarkable and beautiful movement that, I wish it was the 28th Amendment, but it's not. And so we just have 27 amendments. There was also another constitutional movement for the right to vote at 18. So many of you guys know you can vote at the age of 18. Well, you had to actually be 21. But when the Vietnam War was occurring, there was a terrible paradox and irony that soldiers were going to war at 18 and dying and they couldn't even vote. And that felt like just a moral hubris to have a society where 18-year-olds couldn't vote, but they're going to war to die. And that movement became so popular that the Congress actually just adopted it completely. Mm-hmm. It was passed straight on through. And so, there is a history for constitutional amendment process, and it seems to be the most reasonable way to get public financing, because let's say you get universal basic income, you still have all these other issues that are going to be blocked by money in politics.
The point is that you're making is that there's precedent for a constitutional convention,
absolutely,
and this an amendment happening. So there's a process and there's precedent, and it's potentially
in fairness, the process that Wolfpack has started has not been done before, which is to have a complete state to state resolutions being called from 34 states. So right now, Wolfpack has 5 states, California, Illinois, New Jersey, Rhode Island, and what was the other one? Well, there's 5. And there's been 5 states that have called for it. And those 5 states have kind of been frozen in time because of Bernie Sanders' movement. And so when the 28ers formed in 2012, we were thinking this was going to be the next big movement, is a 28th movement because of Wolfpack. And the states started falling in line. And in a very, I think within a 4-month period, 2 of the states just went down, 3 of the states went down. And then Bernie Sanders' movement started in 2015. I think it's July or August of 2015, he announced his run, and everybody, like mountains and oceans, moved in his direction.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, I agree entirely. Public financing as a path.
All the Nordic countries have it.
As a path out of this hellscape, and it needs to be a major priority. And if we can do it through an amendment to the Constitution, awesome. All for it. Absolutely. I think where we have some disagreement, and where this is where I think the conversation needs to, part of the conversation needs to like happen in a serious way, is just strategically what are next steps, like tomorrow and the day after and next week and next month. How do we open up space for the world to allow for better ideas to be planted and take root, and for us to get to a world where these 4
well, that's the thing is, what else is gonna? I mean, what else is more likely to happen? I mean, we're in a shit box with Trump and Republican and Democrats who, out of all of their orifices, scream Russia.
But it's not.
I mean,
so it's always about the money, right? It's always about the money. But it's not the only. It is not the only problem.
But it's the root cause. So there's a famous quote from there's a famous quote from Henry David Thoreau, who said there's thousands of people hacking at the branches of the problem, but only a few at the roots of the tree.
Okay, but it's not all of the roots.
It's the root cause. It's the biggest root cause of problems in electoral politics.
In electoral politics.
Absolutely.
In the context of that.
Absolutely.
Not fully in the context of our lives.
But once again, Jesse, we acknowledge the role of electoral politics in helping to grant the Golden Square.
Absolutely. But getting money out of electoral politics doesn't get money out of our lives altogether. And
absolutely.
And even in Norway or anywhere else that has majority
there's a
public
movement back to
financing.
inequalities in Norway too. I mean, in Scandinavians, there's growing inequalities over time because it's, as I say, public financing is the farthest reform that's radical within the matrix of reform. So what upsets me with most people is they think, oh, Matt, for liberals, they think I'm fucking crazy because they want a 20th Amendment and a constitutional convention. They think I'm crazy. Now, for radicals, they think, oh, you're fucking reformist, you're a sellout. And I said, well, that's great. I said, that must be great because if you both hate me, then this must be the money shot. I mean, this is the money shot because it's the farthest you can take reform without completely disassembling the state. Right. But it's also the farthest you can take revolution without it being too crazy for people.
Okay, maybe. I mean, it's just money out of politics, not money out of life.
But
it doesn't mean so.
But which countries have gotten closest, or in many cases, guaranteed that golden square? Those are the countries with public financing.
Grant you all of that. Let's move towards possible or probable circumstances, given the fucking, what did you call it? Fuck box?
Fuck shit box. This horrible box we're trapped in.
Yeah.
I mean, we're in a cage. We're in a cage.
And once again, cage with Trump looming over it.
Once again, if you're adulting as an anarchist like Jesse and I, you can acknowledge the horrors of the state, but also acknowledge that states come in different sized cages. Yeah. So you can have a state, and yes, it's coercive and blobbity. Go onto your sectarian Facebook page and tell me how much of an awesome paper anarchist you are and lifestyle anarchist. Use Mara Burchin's phrase. Yeah. But to be an adult and an anarchist, recognize the fact that electoral politics do matter, and that the states come in different sized cages.
Yes.
And when you make the state of the cage larger, you create more potential for radical change to happen. You increase the surplus time for people to imagine and innovate outside of the fucking cage where they can see the holes that are outside of it.
Yeah. And open up some space between the bars.
The weak link in that cage to break us out of the state.
Okay, here, maybe when I'm talking about probabilities, I think what seems evidence from the year of Sanders and the 3 months of Corbyn, a couple of years, but the amazing election performance of Corbyn and the Labour Party and these sorts of recent occurrences, is that this cult of personality, the national level elections, that may be where the first step is before we can even get to a place where a conversation about we're getting close to the numbers that we need for the states to call a constitutional convention. Like maybe we have to elect somebody like Bernie Sanders before that we even get there.
Or it works in parallel. I mean, this is the other thing is we're blocked in a cage for 3.5 years. We're locked out.
Because the conversation the country's having right now is about how many fucking people to kill by, what version of fucking Obamacare.
Kill care. Yeah, exactly.
Kill care do you want?
Trump care is kill care.
So this is like miles and this is like oceans away from.
We actually literally have politicians trying to kill people right now.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that Trump care or kill care has gotten this far tells you like how maniacal the Republican Party is, how really dangerous. I mean, Noam Chomsky has said quite rightly that the biggest threat to world peace is the Republican Party in America. And I have to admit, it is the terrorist threat is the Republican Party. But that being said, the Democrats are massively, malignantly stupid and corrosive to the changes that are needed. So when Trump care was being voted for in Congress, right? This tells you the mindset of the Democrats. Many people thought it was funny, especially liberals, that the Democrats were singing, this song, na, 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 hey, 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 goodbye.
Yeah, okay.
So this song was in reference to the fact that they would be destroyed in the 2018 election. Now, if they were progressives, if they were burners, like my fellow burners and me, and we were there when that vote was taking place to kill Americans, we would have been shouting, murderers, murderers, murderers.
Yeah.
We would look at the source of the ethics, the massive, abnormal, strategic cruelty of that bill, instead of thinking about it as another fucking election cycle. And that's the that right there tells you what's wrong with the Democrats is they can't view anything else outside of an election cycle.
So you were involved with the Bernie Sanders
absolutely effort, and the 28ers was very involved with it.
Right. So talk about that relationship there of like your focus had been for 4 years to that point, like the 28th Amendment, 28ers effort.
Yeah, 3 or 4 years at least. We were probably in our 4th year when he started up. So 2015.
So then how did
our strategy
what was the thinking there?
Well, our strategy was this essentially. It was a total agreement that Bernie wouldn't get very far. That was like kind of, even among us, like who really loved Bernie Sanders. I'd known about Bernie Sanders since 2003 because of his lone voice against the Iraq War among all the cheerleaders in the Democratic Party.
I mean, we'd known about him for a long time as being, the only independent.
Well, the only person and I knew he's such a great communicator. So he'd been on MSNBC or Rachel Maddow or Ed Helms' show, and you could hear him communicate in a very direct, practical, commonsensical. And he was great at framing things in a very accessible way. And he also had this working class accent, which is incredibly compelling. He actually just sounds like a regular person. And his hair's crazy. And all these things that made him not a politician made him the perfect politician. And so the 28ers were thinking of it more like we are going to use Sanders for our movement because when they see that he's going to be destroyed by money in politics and he'll win 3 states, everyone will come back we'll get new members into the 28th movement.
So the thinking going into Bernie Sanders' campaign and then you and your cohort supporting it was that, this is going to end up as an example of this problem.
Yes.
Which will add more fuel to this
exactly.
fire.
Then we can go back to grassroots mechanisms rather than electoral politics.
But what about now? So that
let me finish this off because, number one, he got really fucking close. I mean, we're talking 4 or 5% of the national vote.
Bernie would have fucking won.
Bernie would have won.
Period.
We know that now. And that's the painful thing. And this is why Russia is such a nice little salve to the cavity in the psychology of the democratic brain, is that they can't admit that they lost, and they made a strategic global blunder that will cost millions of people their lives. I mean, I do think that Bernie Sanders not getting elected will actually cost us millions of lives. And people freak out when I say that, and why get upset. And I lost friends over the Sanders-Clinton thing because it had gotten negative, it had gotten dark and dirty. But like I said, I don't think it was negative as Obama and Hillary Clinton in 2008.
We should play the clip of Sarah Silverman at the DNC.
Oh my
right
God!
Here,
yeah, exactly.
telling the Bernie people to shut up.
Oh my God! And then she has the gall to interview Bernie Sanders after the election, like as if with all the burners there saying like, we're going to forgive you for the fact that you just betrayed us. Anything but Trump bullshit.
People, you're being ridiculous. He told us to stretch, so I figured I'd add that. They made me cut off my speech, and now we have to stretch. Oh, I have so much I want to say.
Well, okay, what? Listen to that. Listen to what you did. This is a comedian. This is the power of comedy.
Thank God they can fix this in post.
The thing is, Bernie would have won, but what was impressive was he proved all of us wrong. I mean, across the board. If everyone thought that Trump wasn't going to win, everyone thought Bernie wouldn't get anywhere. I thought, oh yeah, Dennis Kucinich, I found out, won Hawaii when he ran. And I was like, in 2008, or I think 2008. I was like, wow, okay, I didn't even know Dennis Kucinich won a state. But then I was thinking to myself, wow, maybe Bernie will win 3 or 4 or 5, but he's not going to win over 20, you know? And that was the shocking thing is he won over 20, and he came very close. And of course, I think by all accounts, there was massive epistemic cheating going on in many ways, which should have disqualified Hillary Clinton and the Democrats from even being part of this nomination process. But Bernie got $27 on average, and he was outraising her for about 4 or 5 months. He was outraising Hillary Clinton, and she was running out of veins to tap like a heroin addict. She just couldn't find new veins. She had to keep going back to the moneyed class, and every time she came out, they had these sound units to try to block out sound so they couldn't overhear her talking to her Debbie Downers that were giving her money. And activists were throwing cash on her limo or whatever she was driving, her SUV, saying that she's paid off and bought off by the political system, taking money from the very institutions that she's complaining about, prisons, military, the industrial complex, pollutive instruments of torture like Exxon. She would take money from anyone. And she increasingly had to go back to Hollywood to get that money. And so Hillary herself represented what was wrong in establishment politics. And the Democrats picked her in the most anti-establishment election cycle of my lifetime.
Right.
So they picked the most establishment person.
Yep.
And of course Bernie would have won. I mean, Bernie would have won even if he ran with Jill Stein as a third-party candidate. But what we learned from Bernie Sanders was he was so successful, he ended up earning the 28th movement because everyone is now obsessed mindlessly with political parties as if they're the be-all and end-of all social change. And so the burners have all split into different factions. Democratic Socialist America, Green Party, Bernie-crats. Burners become Bernie-crats trying to take over a bereft and corrupt party.
Yeah,
and then there's the fourth part, the People's Party, draft Bernie. So it's highly fractured. It's very depressing.
Yeah.
Very depressing. Yeah. And not only were they all fractured, but they're all fractured in political parties. So what we'd assumed was that we'd be at the front of a big movement, like that energy would move back to money in politics, has not happened.
No.
When it should. Because for 3.5 years, you're not going to get anything meaningful from Congress or Senate.
I feel like, this should have been, it's too bad that money for public financing in the 28th Amendment wasn't part of what led to Occupy.
Yeah.
And that wasn't the primary demand of Occupy? Because it seems like what we need for something like this is another Occupy.
Well, that's the whole thing is the problem with Occupy, and I didn't get to talk about this earlier because we're trying to do large brush canvas slots on our painting here. But the main thing is that it was so purity obsessed about anarchy that everything was of equal value.
Not about participatory.
Well, the participatory process,
Yes.
and so every issue was equally as bad, right? And so at Occupy, what would happen is we'd all try to be as horizontal as possible about all of the issues, and so we wouldn't prioritize or do a power analysis. And if you're a trade unionist, if you're like Jane McElvey, who has a book called No Shortcuts to Power, any type of activism in unions requires a power analysis.
Yeah.
And Occupy didn't do a power analysis. It just said, all these issues are fucked up and bullshit, but don't rank them. Don't prioritize one over the other. So it's basically the logic of intersectionality, where everything's exactly the same.
Yeah, same weight.
It's all same weight. And that's the huge mistake, is because money in politics isn't really an issue or a wound as a cause for multiple wounds. Right. So,
but it was Occupy Wall Street. It was there. It
was mentioned quite a bit. Money in politics was mentioned quite a bit.
Yeah, it was part of, but
there
hadn't been.
But for certain sectors that were enraptured by anarchy, especially for people that just experienced anarchist democratic models and were in love with them, is that it was too reformist. It was too much about electoral politics, and then we magically changed the entire city because we're all anarchists and everyone was going to join us and we're going to reform the society. So it had no strategic logic. You know, Marshall Gahn said profoundly, who worked for the United Food Workers, that the problem with Occupy was that it mistook a tactic for a strategy.
Exactly.
Occupying the square is a tactic. It's not a goal or a strategy.
Right.
It's a tactic.
Right.
That's fundamental.
We're infants at doing this, so the more practice, the better.
And this is a run start for millennials.
I say, hey, the more practice we get at, the better.
Yeah,
it's going to fail.
But the intersectionality, the fetishizing of intersectionality is what led to its doom. Because if people had done a power analysis, they would have said, "Oh, immigration, foreclosure, student debt, banking,
it's all money,
military-industrial complex, for-profit healthcare. It was all money in politics. The biggest, most powerful people get what they want out of the shit that they get from political politics.
And what are we trying to do about money or money in politics?
Yeah, absolutely.
What is the demand? There was always
and the thing is there was a trapped component between reformists and revolutionaries, and they could never come to a consensus other than shit is fucked up and bullshit. And so the reformists slowly went away or maybe transformed. I mean, some people did become more radical.
I think this is what you mean when you say we adult with our anarchism. We're not dogmatic about either.
David Harvey has said this, and so has Murray Bookchin, is that there is dogma in Marxism like there's dogma in anarchism.
Right.
And David Harvey got tired in some sense of the dogmatic aspects, sectarian aspects of Marxism, and kind of moved away from that. And Murray Bookchin, who was also a Marxist originally, got very tired at the end of life of these kind of dogmatic lifestyleists. He called them lifestyleists, lifestyle anarchists, who were just fetishizing anarchy in its purest, ideological framework.
All for utopian thinking.
Yes, absolutely.
Anarchism, as far as we've culturally at this point, probably the most reasonable thing, but
rooted in pragmatism. But rooted in pragmatism and experimentation, and an acknowledgement that local actors in reformist cultures have adverse effects on us.
But what the fuck do we do now? What do we do next? So what do
you propose? I mean, I'm telling you if I could get people inspired successfully. If the 28ers was successful, if Wolfpack was successful, Nine and Rise was successful, if Move to Amend was successful, we would be organizing this successfully.
I think as a member of this generation,
Generation X?
Yeah, Generation X or whatever the fuck you call it.
We're the tail end of that.
The context for us is the echo of the 60s.
Yes.
And the
nostalgia and
the mythos of that, the envy of the previous generation having having lived through 1969 and where real shit happened and what's even possible now, and so then we were just slackers. But then, holy shit!
Well, what happened in what happened in the 60s is really pivotal.
It was really pivotal. But so
this is one of the most profound moments of anything I've ever read from Naomi Klein. In her book, This Changes Everything, she says, look at the social justice movements. Every social justice movement that has tried to take down capitalism has failed when it's made that appeal. So feminism, civil rights activism, climate change, anytime there was an anti-capitalist part of that platform, it would get excised. So for women wanted to talk about getting paid for raising children, right? They wanted to reform the notion of labor and capital, kinship and raising kids, that deserved to be paid for.
Right.
So what happened? It became about voting. It became lean-in feminism. Civil rights movement. That was about like looking at housing and capitalism and worker rights and wages. It ended up being just about voting. It didn't end up being about class or capitalism. And then in the climate change movement, what's happened to all these NGOs? They take money from the biggest polluters. So they don't want to deal with capitalism or, they don't want to deal with the eating of animals and dairy and all of this. And so what ends up happening in most social justice movements, and Naomi Klein makes this comment very, very clear and very, very profoundly, is that all social justice movements fail when it comes to the class reckoning, right? They're able to get accommodations to the 1%, but they're not able to take down the 1%. So they're able to get limited reforms that are largely symbolic, but not material in the sense that it creates true liberation.
We will talk about the book Inventing the Future, Nick Cernick and Alex Williams' book. I think they have some really keen perspective
and antidotes to the current environment.
And I think what we started this conversation with, I think, was really a reflection of how they opened the book about folk politics and the failures of folk politics, and this is sort of what we're talking about. A lot of those examples, the failures of folk politics, but also looking at what is the system? What is
folk politics is Occupy, right?
And all the sort of localism and talk about that
fetishizing of local politics.
Yeah, and what they look at is how is the world run right now, and how did it get here? How did that happen? How did they win? What can we learn from how neoliberalism took over the world?
Borrow their playbook,
right? And ought we borrow some of those tactics?
Because the right has borrowed our playbook in the 1930s.
I think that's a sensible thing to look at. To think about. All right, is it through a series of think tanks and
Montpelier's Institute
and policy development
and timing, knowing the right time to
timing and being patient,
keeping the infighting closed off, right? So
keeping it behind closed doors,
the left openly fights with itself,
right,
in a theatrical way that doesn't really help.
Well, because we regular people live out here in the real world.
Yeah, we don't have small conference rooms,
right?
And we're also organizing in the age of the internet.
I would not, I'm going to advocate for like
a von Hayek conference
kind of
room,
private elite group. I'm totally opposed to that. But there's something there to.
We could talk about Mark Fisher's Exiting the Vampire Castle as part of that, which is that the left, and before it even critiques its oppositional view, will internalize the critique first and eat at each other. So best example of that, of course, is Russell Brand's conversation with, I think, one of the spokespeople for Hard Talk or Real Talk, a British show. And, he used some kind of slightly sexist phrases in his conversation, and people were calling him out as a sexist. And so therefore, any of his critiques was illegitimate because he didn't get every ethical issue right. Yeah. And so you have to be ethically pure in the left in order to actually do something or anything.
And hey, reminder, we're not ethically pure
either. Exactly.
Just on the face of it, just by identity alone.
If we're in this trapped shit box of the Trump, me too. If we're in this trapped shit box for 3.5 years, and you would agree that on paper, money in politics should be the thing that we focus on, but you think it's not as likely to happen as what then, or not as worthy of a strategy? Do you have another idea?
Okay, not as worthy as. Let me get back to that in 1 second. the thing from Inventing the Future that I was trying to get to there was the neoliberals had all of these policy platforms, this whole toolbox ready to go for the moment when they could deploy it.
Absolutely.
And that's sort of how I'm thinking about something like this, like 28th Amendment, basic income.
Our podcast even.
Are like all of these things, universal single-payer healthcare, like these should be like the things that we're like really clear about.
Keeping in the toolbox.
As the toolbox for when there is the opportunity.
Yes.
And I don't know what the opportunity is going to be. The opportunity may be there may be something that prompts us to
pull out something different
for another occupying the square again sometime soon. So there could be another Occupy thing that happens. The next time something like that happens, we best have this shit ready to go. We best have these things that we want to have happen ready to rock.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. The planning is involved.
Or, so maybe it's an Occupy, or it's a candidate.
Yes.
It's a Bernie Sanders.
A Democratic Socialist of some variety.
It's a Jeremy Corbyn, right?
That's 2020 we're looking at, right?
So I don't,
Yeah, it's hard to tell because we're locked into this shitbox for 3.5 years where even if the Democrats, let's say, were to get back the House and the Senate by long aims, they're not doing that well, they're still going to have a Republican president, regardless if it's Trump or not.
And I think why I was like going through this historical thing, like, what is the context of all of these failures or successes? Maybe it's because it's just so recent, but I think there's real insights or there's real potential hope in the success that the Labor Party has recently had, even though they didn't win. But they've demonstrated an example of something that works.
It's part of a pattern, right? I mean, because Thatcher came before Ronald Reagan. So if anything, we know there's a mimicry with how politics happen. We talked about that with our friends Josh and Alex on the podcast about Jeremy Corbyn, is that Blair came before Clinton, Thatcher came before Reagan. And so if Corbyn is showing potentially this kind of echo effect that crosses the Atlantic where it's quite obvious whoever we're going to get is going to be very, very left and much farther than anything the Democrats have given us up to this point. And it's because of these multiple contingent crises of capitalism, right? Where we're, and this is the tragedy is, we've had friends, and I'll talk about this later in a future episode, where they've experienced virulent, visible, visceral, grotesque racism in a public forum, which they wouldn't have experienced, I don't think, in a pre-Trump, pre-dead-end neoliberal era, where we're tracing back the same steps as the kinds of things that were patterns for the Jewish Holocaust, with the Nazi campaigns of terror, and then also with, the lynchings, with, the kinds of things that were accompanied with the civil rights movement, with fire burnings of buses and chapels. And so we're tracing back the same sad circles because we haven't really dealt with capitalism in any fundamental sense. And now we're back to the same kind of horrors with it.
And I think the thing that I'm wanted to point out from Corbyn and the Labor Party successes, as slight as they may have been, is like what to do, like a way to do things, which is just say how the world ought to be. Say what your vision is. And let's talk about what your vision is.
Well, that was the beautiful thing, is the manifesto so clearly outlined, hey, this is what I want. Do you want it too? Yeah. Come and join me.
Yeah.
And Bernie Sanders, and literally when he would do the debates with that scoundrel Hillary Clinton, he would, in 4 minutes, lay out everything he wanted to do.
Yeah.
And it was in beautiful, simple sentences.
I don't know that we get money out of politics without it being part of a bigger package. Potentially, right? Maybe this can't be like as much as it may be right at the core, at money, which is the fucking
We
problem.
have to deal with the question of timing, right?
We have to deal with the question of timing. We have to deal with the question of appeal, of persuasion, of the scale of the movement, of all of these things. And it seems like perfect fit to a bigger platform, but hard sell on its own.
Hard sell on its own because, once again, there's no momentum. I've said this in several of our
Is that a pun? No momentum is like momentum.
Exactly, Jeremy
UK.
Corbyn. Thank you for granting me that wit.
Yeah.
It wasn't self-evident to me when I said it. But generally speaking, if Wolfpack were to hit 16 states of the 34 it's needed, then there'd be like, oh shit, this is kind of possible. It does not seem plausible that we're going to have a 20th Amendment when we've been stuck at 5 states for over almost 2 years now. So they haven't been able to reorganize in a way. And it looks like they're doing some reorganization now. But the Young Turks channel and Cenk Uyghur's been putting in this stupid idea for something called Justice Democrats, which is just totally... I won't even talk about it. It's just a dumb thing. So it was moving money away from Wolfpack, which was a much better strategy and much more bipartisan, right? It wasn't trapped within the logic of a political party. And money in politics has a broad appeal. If you're to ask people, I mean, this is the study that I always cite, is 9 out of 10 Americans admit openly that money in politics is destroying our democracy. 9 out of 10. That's more than fucking angels, global warming.
Fucking angels?
Belief in fucking angels. Yeah. That's more than fucking angel. I don't know if there's 9 out of 10 people fucking angels, but that's more people
than believe in Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, definitely believe in Jesus too. And so if you have that consensus, what you lack is the emotional appeal to organize around an idea.
Right.
And, there's a great quote from one of the characters. I can't remember the character from House of Cards, but he's the novelist. And he says, like, it's so much easier to get people to believe an idea if it's connected to a person.
Yep.
If we are rational people, we would organize around ideas only because, number one, humans are pretty fallible and leaders are often pretty fucking disappointing.
Yeah.
But ideas don't disappoint if they're good ideas.
And leaders will continue to be disappointing.
This is the problem. This is the problem. Is like if you look at Venezuela, when Hugo Chavez is out of the picture, things fall apart because people obsess and only seem to organize around the cult of personality. And we can't get people to be motivated by the conceptual richness of powerful ideas.
The poison pyramid.
It's the poison pyramid. And it might be rooted in just the subconscious nature of tribalism in human affairs, is that this belief that this person's going to deliver me.
I don't know that there's any use in us trying to speculate on what might happen. It's pretty futile.
But there's a third component, which is there's the 28th movement, right? There's, of course, waiting for that next general election when everyone votes, or at least half the country votes.
2018.
And then there's, of course, once again, a recommitment for some people to look at local transformation and change in their communities, city council races, organizing on the state level, like we're doing with single payer for SB 562. Mm-hmm. So there's a belief that, okay, if the government's so out of whack now, and this is the irony, is the government's more dysfunctional now than it was with Obama because the Republicans can't get even anything passed on their own that they agree on.
Yeah.
And so it's so dysfunctional with Trump's confusion, his scandals, his daily sayings have just been a total distraction for Republicans passing policy. So local politics might be, for some people, that if we organize locally, we'll have more change. And that we can take over the city by doing moratoriums on warehouses or cleaning up pollution or closing down the prisons that we're building in some of our communities.
But I think,
so local politics is another third.
We are going to continue to fail, or at least feel like we're failing, until we can have clarity around proposed policies for better conditions.
Yes.
Right? So I think as fucking fucked up as the House Speaker shelving the SB 562 for an indeterminate amount of time here in California Anthony Rendon.
Well, and many people think he's doing it because Jerry Brown wants him to do it.
Okay.
Because it's political hot potato.
Maybe. But what I'm saying is, as fucked up as that is, it is a lesson.
Mm-hmm.
And
about money in politics.
Well, so not only a lesson about money in politics, it's a lesson, I think, also about have real, detailed, defendable programs, plans in place. Like we can't
contingency plans. We have to have a much more organized contingency plans. Well, like for instance,
I mean because SB 562 was one spot bill. So his stated reasons for not moving it forward,
incomplete funding,
was that woefully incomplete funding. That it wasn't complete, which is one. It's a wrong argument because that's why it's in going to the fucking
process.
That's the process.
Because it's who's supposed to deal with funding but the fucking House Assembly.
But I think fair enough. That's a lesson for us. I think, which is, let's really work this shit out. Let's have some detailed fucking plans and let's have them be clear. So whether it's how public financing is going to work for elections, whether it's how...
trace back to Anthony Rennan. Okay, so I'm involved with Healthy California. I'm in solidarity with the California Nurses Association.
Yes.
My organization, our nonprofit, 501c4, the 28ers have done 4 or 5 events. We've done tabling. We've worked in several events in the Inland Empire on SB 562. And we've worked with California Partnership as well. And the thing that we've noticed and that I've come to an agreement, which is that it's one thing to have no funding attached, which is actually, I think, strategically pretty nice because, number one, it's up to the Congress and the Assembly and the Assembly and the Senate to come up with the funding. Because if we'd given them one funding model, they would have balked and said, no, you can't tell us what to do. Because then they would have said, oh, you're giving us a funnel model, you're not letting us do our job. So they would have said the opposite. What should have happened is that the report on the financing from Bob Pollin, who ran it from UMass at Amherst, and it's a great study, great article, he's a great person. The authors that worked with Pollin on that funding mechanism made total sense. 2.3% tax across the board for any purchase that's not food, right? And then it's not a regressive tax because it's based on how much you spend and shop, and it wouldn't include food. And of course, you wouldn't have this up and down with the healthcare funding because it's based on consumer shopping and business purchases. And so it was a really great model. It sounds good, and it would be it was going to be $37 billion cheaper than the current system, which is already, by the way, $368 billion. Yeah. Right. So the thing that pissed me off about the LA Times and Sacramento Bee was they said it's going to cost $400 billion. Well, how much does the current system cost? How much? 368. And it would be 331 if implemented under the policies of Bob Pollin, not the crappy piece of shit bought off system from the Assembly or Senate that did the kind of report cost saying it would cost 400. Bob Pollin said it cost 331, not 368, not 400. The mistake that Healthy California made, looking back, if we don't get any farther, and I'm in solidarity with them, the mistake they made is they didn't provide a plan of multiple options. So they could have had multiple funding mechanisms. Said, here is 4 different ways to fund this. You fucking select one of the 4.
This is the very basic thing. This is what staff anywhere who work with no. This is what I do. This is what I have to do at my fucking day job all the time. I have a plan to do something for the university, right? I have to present options to the administrators. Here's a proposal for a thing. Here's some ways we could do it. A would be the best. B would be acceptable, and C, okay, if we have to. Like, this is just standard operating procedure.
Yeah, exactly. So once again, there's a lot of moving pieces. It's not like they're rolling in at Healthy California or the California Association, but they need to think this through, which is, number one, that study should have come out much earlier. It didn't come out until at the end of the Senate, of the Senate vote. Yeah. They should have had that study come out, but not only should they have that study, they should have had the authors come up with 3 or 4 other funding mechanisms. Yeah. And so, like when you're at a restaurant, you have 4 entrees to choose from rather than 1. And so the Democrats would have been put in a horrible position because they would have said, well, look, we gave you 4 different funding options. You're not picking anything, and you're not coming up with anything. Mm-hmm. So you're full of shit.
The point I was trying to make, too, is just to echo back to the example we had discussed in episode 7 with Josh about the Labor Party's manifesto and their platform, and the fact that they had costed it. They had costed their whole platform, whereas the Tories hadn't. Mm-hmm. and that was like, oh, they knew they had to do that because they were going to get grilled about it.
But the thing is, and Josh had mentioned this too, they still got railed over the coals.
They're going to get railed, but you got to know
that they pretended that they didn't cost it, but everyone knew that they did.
But but we got to know we're fighting against the powerful elite. We're going to cling on for dear life. They're going to be relentless and nasty,
and they can buy their zombies.
Yeah, we got to fucking have our shit together. Yeah.
And it's not our values and our morals that are messed up among the left. It's our bad sense of strategy.
Yeah.
Bad sense of strategy.
Yeah.
It's like we need to develop like our own version of like West Point for the left. I mean, we really need a West Point for the left, like where we just say, hey, what has worked? What do they use? What can we innovate? How can we innovate? And so not only can we borrow from neoliberal von Hayek, Montpellier Institute, but what could we innovate on top of that, knowing what we're good at? And, the interesting things about Jeremy Corbyn's campaigns is they borrowed a lot from Bernie Sanders' campaign.
Yeah.
And they had people that were part of his campaign on their campaign. And the memes, the millennials in Britain were able to destroy the Tories and ridicule them, mock them openly for their shitty manifesto, and with great videos and memes and art. And so, there's ways that we can innovate beyond just the status quo.
Yeah. And so what
we need a West Point for the left is really what it comes down to, right? Like
something like this. Like we need
Jedi. We need Jedi training.
We need Jedi training.
Yeah, I mean, because this is the mistake, is because by creating an escape hatch where Healthy California Association did not have a costed bill.
Yeah, we need much more than
costed choices.
Well-meaning hopes and dreams.
Exactly.
We've got to have real fucking plans.
Yes.
That we carefully and strategically
and
put together.
Be as cynical about the opposition as we are hopeful about ourselves.
Okay.
But I mean, this is the thing. Is we got to know. There is no way to get things done without some belief and hope, and that it's a sustaining liquid agent. But we also should be relentlessly cynical in our opposition, and we sometimes give them a grain of salt, or we give them an extra napkin when we should be ready and willing to engage with cynical instruments.
They kill us every day.
That are exactly.
Yes.
That are organized principally for the get off pleasure of destroying the 99%.
For fuck's sake.
I mean, this is the thing is when we look at this money in politics, transformation of local politics, the next general election that's 3.5 years away, you can't help but feel incredibly dispossessed by the fact that Sanders winning would have meant we would have won it all, and that we would have had the House and the Senate.
Right.
And we would be talking about basic income right now. Honestly, I think we would be talking about basic income. The millennials would have ballooned during the general election, and we would have got the House, the Senate. Bernie would have been able to powerfully transform the Democratic Party from on top of it. I think he would have become a Democratic Party member after he won the election and would have been able to create that change. And now we have to acknowledge the fact that these Hillary Clinton supporters cock-blocked us, and Hillary Clinton people, and that many of these people that are very comfortable in their positions about what is a liberal ends up blocking the more profound changes that need to come. And that we've essentially lost time. We've lost 4 years for climate change. We're putting people at miserable risk. I mean, with Trump care, kill care, just every week we have to see, is it going to pass?
I mean, I don't know. We can't predict what is going to play out and what opportunities might arise, what tragedies might befall us. But I think it only makes sense to have your vision clear and your toolkit ready, so that when we get to the door, we can make shit happen.
So, Jesse, do we do that? Or does
we got a lot of
the mixtape do that?
We got a lot of fucking work. I mean, that's part of what we want to
together. Yeah,
that's what we want to talk about. That's why we're fucking doing this, is because we want to have these necessary conversations about what the fucking toolkit is.
We don't want to be the only two maladjusted people in the room.
No, when we
want you to be with us in this steamship towards utopia.
It's not going to be us, but whoever it is.
Well.
I mean, hopefully it's us.
I'm saying us as the primary. Yeah,
us as the 99%. When the normal
or the
person,
80%, right?
80%, whatever. When the normal person crosses that threshold, to be in a position to make change, meaningful change, what is in their toolkit.
Yeah, what have we given them?
That's why we want your daughter, the 9-year-old, to be president right now, because she knows
that you have to listen
that
to your
food,
inner. You have to listen to your inner shadows, right?
and that she's going to make sure that everybody has food, shelter, healthcare, education, free.
Exactly. When we talked about this podcast, she mentioned it, and we didn't even talk about it with her. She just knew. We didn't even talk about it. I mean,
Yeah.
we didn't. Did we mention the golden square to her?
No, she just knew these things.
We didn't even mention golden square, and she said, "Yeah, these are the 4 things everybody needs."
Yeah,
So a 9-year-old's got that down.
yeah.
Where are you at,
So,
sister, brother?
but we got to have detailed plans for this because they're
Yes.
going to come at this shit all
Exactly.
the time.
And so
Nonstop.
And so
Relentless.
knowing that we can't fetishize one part of that toolbox. We have to know that it's there and that it gets pulled out when the time's right.
Yes.
And that we know that tool will allow other tools to get out of that toolbox.
Yeah. So that's it. That's this episode.
What must be done?
Yes.
So this is the cap on the cap. We're now well past 10 episodes, and we're going to continue to keep building that toolbox.
Please share this episode, previous ones, tell folks about it, talk to us about it. We'd love to get more feedback. Leave a review on iTunes.
Join our newsletter on the website.
Follow on Facebook and everywhere else on Instagram. We're on Instagram. Do you know
Oh yeah,
this?
and if you have an idea for an interview, or you're writing something yourself and you want to be interviewed on something that can be added into the toolbox, contact us.
Again, we're just normal assholes, so we'll respond.
We're not super special assholes. We're
Yeah,
just
we're not
normal
special.
ones. Yeah, we're the ones that we're the ones that can take most forms of wipes.
Power to the normals.
Kill the normies. Oh no! All right. So thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Matthew. Cheers.
Cheers.